Starting off with number 10, the house with the animals in the walls. That literally sounds like a name of a horror movie that already exists. In 2015, the Bretzuis family was renovating their home and was planning on re-insulating their house. However, when they tore open the walls, they discovered it was lined with bodies of dead animals. These animals were wrapped in newspaper from the 1930s and 40s. Along with these animals, there were spices, artifacts, and other miscellaneous items in the wall. Apparently, all these items can be linked to powwow or Dutch magic, which is used to treat ailments or gain protection. Some of the items in the wall were linked to spells that promote the care of livestock, treatments for illnesses, and even used to conjure demons. They were living with these animals in the walls for several years, which in turn caused some of the family members to become ill and caused a constant odor in the house. Now, let me paint you a picture of the movie I'm imagining. Family moves into a house, maybe it was cheap real estate, but as they are living there, strange things start to occur, including them hearing scratching from inside the walls and seeing apparitions of demons. Eventually they tear open the walls to investigate and find the animals, but also unleash some of the dark magic that was used in the time. I think I deserve an Oscar already. Moving on, at number 9 we have Rig 12. Now this next story comes from the perspective of a paramedic who was an ambulance driver. It's from the Reddit user Zerbo. Well, they have stated that a lot of paramedics have had a spooky encounter with a haunted ambulance. Maybe it's from somebody who passed away in the back, they don't know. But it's always in the ambulance known as Rig 12. So it was 3 AM, which, bad start already, that's the witching hour. Anyways, him and his partner were both waiting in their ambulance in a small community. That's when they heard a man say, "Oh my god, am I dying?" Then they heard heavy breathing. After that, they heard the oxygen bottle hiss, as if air was being seeped out to help him with his heavy breathing. They thought for sure somebody was in the back of the ambulance. But when they went to investigate, there was nothing there. The oxygen bottle wasn't even touched. Okay, so like a film about a haunted ambulance sounds kinda lame, but imagine a film about the patients that died in the vehicle that keep reliving their deaths and haunting the paramedics. Like, come on, it's not a bad idea. Maybe it's not Oscar worthy, but there's definitely some potential with this concept. In our 8th spot, we have the White Woman. So a Connecticut couple was driving along a winding forest road one day when they encountered a pale woman in a long white gown in the middle of the road. Thankfully, they swerved out of the way and avoided her. When they looked back, she was no longer there. Upon researching the history of the town, they discovered a woman named Sarah Bishop. Sarah lived in a cave in the woods and would dress up in a long white gown only for church every Sunday. But in 1810, she passed away after freezing to death, so they encountered Sarah's ghost that day. Now, if they make this into a movie, then it should be about Sarah's life, like why was she living in the cave, for how long, etc. And then maybe make it a little more spooky, maybe have her ghost haunt the town members, who knows. Moving on to number 7, we have the Lighthouse Keepers. In December of 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers in Flannan Islands vanished without a trace. After a ship arrived and no lighthouse keepers came out to greet them, the captain knew something was up. The lighthouse door was left unlocked. 2 jackets were missing, food was left uneaten, and a chair was knocked over. Weirdest part, the kitchen clock had stopped working. Not only that, but there were very strange entries in the lighthouse logs. It was written down that the principal lighthouse keeper James was oddly quiet, and that the other assistant William was crying. On December 15th, someone wrote, "A storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." But there were no reported storms in the area until December 17th. It is theorized that the staff tried to retrieve fallen ropes when a wave washed them out to sea. But why would one man not wear his coat while doing this task when it was freezing out? Also, people don't buy this theory because they are very experienced men. Other people think that they were killed or kidnapped by aliens. Another great mystery that would make a great premise for a movie. In our 6th spot, we have Hotel Monte Vista. The Monte Vista Hotel in Flagstaff, Arizona is known to be home to multiple paranormal entities. The hotel opened in 1927 and people have seen several ghosts, including a ghost of a bellboy, bank robber, and even a dancing couple. If you stay in room 220, then apparently the TV will change channels on its own. Even some people have felt cold hands touching them while they sleep. Now, the ghost of the bellboy will apparently knock on the door and even say room service, but will not be there when anyone checks. He could at least leave some food or something for them. Some guests have seen him outside of room 210 and described him dressed in an old-fashioned uniform with brass buttons. Now, in 1970, 3 men robbed a bank near the hotel, and afterwards they celebrated their robbery at the bar in the hotel. However, 1 robber was shot and bled to death in the hotel. People say that they see bar stools and drinks moving on their own. It is also said that 2 women were murdered in room 306 in the 1940s, and during the night they will place a hand over the guests' mouths and throats, making them wake up and not being able to breathe. They mainly target male guests. That's because they were murdered by male individuals. There's also a little boy that roams the hotel, and even a chair that rocks by itself in room 305. Sounds of baby crying in the basement and a dancing ghost couple. And the list continues. From its creepy history to the countless ghosts that roam the hall, this hotel would be a great basis for a movie. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Hotel Cecil. This hotel is just super cursed. Tons of deaths have occurred in this hotel, and it's haunted as a result. So the Hotel Cecil is located in downtown Los Angeles. I suggest not staying there if you are ever visiting. So the first recorded death was in 1931, and it was a suicide. Then all throughout the 30s, 40s, and 60s, there were also similar cases of suicide. They believed that if you stayed at this hotel, then you may be compelled to harm yourself. Then in 1964, a tenant was brutally murdered, and the case is still unsolved. Then you have the serial killer Richard Ramirez, who stayed at this hotel. And finally you have ELISA Lam. We've talked about her a bunch, but she's the Canadian woman who was found dead in the hotel's water tank, and no one knows why or how she got there. So yeah, this hotel and its gruesome past would form a great movie premise. In our 4th spot, we have the Blackbirds. So on New Year's Eve in 2010 in Arkansas, 5,000 blackbirds started behaving unusually. They slammed into buildings, phone poles, and trees and died instantly. People just brushed this off, saying that they were probably just spooked by the fireworks. But then it happened again next year on New Year's Eve. This time there was a ban on fireworks and none were used. So why were so many birds dying? Well, people believe that this was a warning that the end is near. Now, before you comment down below saying there's already a movie made, it's called The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, I know. But I'm thinking that there should be a movie about a bunch of omens that keep warning individuals for the end of the world. The birds would just be one example. Or maybe they experience this bird omen and then there truly is an apocalypse. But no one has realized that it has happened. Slowly more signs start to show that in fact they have died from an apocalypse and are living in a different world or different reality. Coming in our 3rd spot, we have Lizzie Borden. Hold it right there. Before you comment down below, I know that there are a couple movies already out there surrounding Lizzie Borden, I know. But I'm going to provide you with an original, even spookier concept. So for those of you who don't know, in 1892, Lizzie Borden was suspected of killing her father and stepmother with an axe. In fact, there's this like really creepy nursery rhyme that goes, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Creepy. But we actually don't know who killed her parents. Some believe that it was Lizzie, other believes that she possibly couldn't have done it. Other people have theorized that Lizzie Borden actually had a child. So, I would love a movie surrounding that idea. If she did have a child, how she would have to try and hide and protect the baby, and how the baby grew up knowing her mother's tragic past. I want to see a movie about that. Coming in at our 2nd spot, we have the Pollock twins. So this starts off on the more sad side. On May 7th, 1957, 2 sisters named Joanna, age 11, and Jacqueline, age 6, were hit by a car on their way to church. The parents, Florence and John Pollock, were grief-stricken. But the father always remained hopeful, saying that his daughters would come back to them, even saying that they were going to be reborn in the form of twins. Well, in 1958, Florence gave birth to 2 twin girls, just as her husband predicted. They named them Jillian and Jennifer. Now, the weirdness doesn't stop there. Apparently, these twins had eerie resemblances to their previous daughters. Jillian was more slender, just like Joanna was, and Jennifer was more stocky, just like how Jacqueline was. Furthermore, Jennifer had trouble writing because she would hold the pencil in her fist. That was exactly how Jacqueline would write as well. The twins also asked for the same toys that Joanna and Jacqueline had, even naming the dolls the same. That's not all. Jennifer had the same birthmark on her waist that Jacqueline had, and Jennifer had a birthmark on her forehead that was the same spot where Jacqueline had a scar. The girls were also terrified of cars and crossing the street. there are so many more resemblances between the twins and the daughters that passed away. Like how the girls once were caught playing and were talking about an accident that killed Joanna and Jacqueline, saying details that they couldn't have known, especially since the parents kept the past from them. Wow. What do you guys think of this one? And in our number 1 spot, we have the Utah murder suicide. Now, this story is very disturbing. In September of 2014, Utah teen Jason McGee entered his home and found his parents, Benjamin and Christy Strack, and his 3 younger siblings dead. At first, police did not know why the parents would kill themselves and their children. Later, they discovered the creepy truth. So, when Jansen came home, all he found was a to-do list for him. It said things like feed the pets, watch over the house. But that was the only thing left for him. There was no nothing. When he went upstairs to the master bedroom, him and his grandmother found his family's body spread across the floor. After investigation, police found that the parents were convinced that there was an oncoming apocalypse and wanted to escape this evil before it happened. They also found that the mother, Christy Strack, was in contact with Dan Lafferty, a killer who murdered his sister-in-law and her daughter. Apparently, they became good friends after exchanging numerous letters. Christy and Benjamin would both even visit him in prison. Police think that Dan also had a big influence on them and pushed them to harm themselves. What's sad is how the kids didn't really have a choice and how they were convinced that this was the right thing to do. The one 14-year-old even wrote a letter to his friend saying that his toys could go to him when he's gone. Police believe that Jansen was spared since he was engaged and independent from his family. Starting off this countdown, we have the case of Cindy Song. Cindy Song was a 21-year-old senior at Penn State University. In 2001, on Halloween night, she disappeared and was never seen again. Now, to this day, this case still remains unsolved. So on Halloween night, Cindy returned home from a party around 4 a.m. She dropped off her bag, cell phone, and took off her false eyelashes. However, Cindy herself was nowhere to be found. So police don't know where Cindy went. Was she kidnapped or murdered? No one knows. Now, a criminal named Paul Weekly did describe a woman that matched Cindy's description, saying that he kidnapped a woman in the area who he thought was a prostitute. He then admitted to killing her and multiple others. The police did find the other bodies, but not Cindy's. They think that he just made up this story in hopes for a lesser sentence. So, here's my opinion on this case. We don't truly know if Cindy made it home safe. The friend that dropped her off didn't hang around to make sure she got inside her apartment. So someone could have kidnapped her and taken her keys to return some of her belongings. That way it looked like she did return home. Either way, this case needs to be turned into a movie. In our 9th spot, we have the text from the afterlife. This story was shared by the Reddit user named Ledger Domain. He claimed that his new partner would receive text from her deceased son. In the post, he claims that she would get a text from him at least once a week, but her son's phone was in a drawer at his sister's house. It no longer had a SIM card and it wasn't working. He also said that she would receive the text when she was feeling down. The text would say things along the lines of, "I love you, see you soon." Now, some people commented on the post saying that a text saying "see you soon" seems pretty sinister, and people thought that it may not be from her son, but a dark spirit. So, what if we had a movie about a grieving mother who thinks she's in touch with her son, but instead is being haunted by an evil spirit, posing as her son? Maybe instead this spirit gets her to do extreme tasks like harm others or herself. I think there's probably a movie out there that's similar to this concept, but it's still a good premise. Number 8. In 1943, 4 boys in Stourbridge, England located something odd in an old wych elm tree. Upon climbing up and looking in the tree, one boy discovered that a decomposed body of a young woman was stuffed inside. A gold wedding ring was on her left hand, while her right hand was sawed off. The hand was later discovered buried just below the tree. This woman was apparently 35 years of age and had apparently been in the tree for 18 months. Now, when this body was discovered, no one knew who it belonged to. That was until graffiti started appearing all around town. The graffiti wrote, "Who put Lubella down the wych elm?" This appeared on a wall in Old Hill. Then in Birmingham, another message appeared. Then another message at Witchbury Hill that read, "Who put Bella in the wych elm?" No one knows who was writing these messages, but it was assumed that they knew the victim as they identified her by her name. This message kept appearing all throughout England and Europe. Over time, police began to lose evidence and even misplaced her body. The case has never been solved, but the graffiti can still be found on some alleyways. Next up at number 7, we have the Watcher. Imagine buying $1 million home only to find out that it was being stalked by a mystery man. Because that's what happened to the next family. They bought a $1.3 million home and claimed it was their perfect dream home. Minus the creepy stalker part. Now, while living at this home, they received several letters from someone who claimed to be watching the home. Some things that the Watcher said in the letters were, "This home has been the subject of my family for decades." Now, I'm personally gonna try and decipher this as we go. So, Detective Lindsay on the case. So, I believe this means that his family has some weird tradition of watching over this house, like observing the families and such. "I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming." I don't know what that means. I don't think he means it in like a biblical way. And then another letter referred to the new owner's children and asked, have they found out what's in the walls yet? And they never did tear open the walls. I'm curious to know what's in them. Come on people, do some investigating. Anyways, this family ended up moving out of this home and the previous owners admitted that they too were being watched. I could honestly see this being made into a really good thriller mystery. I'm personally already invested in this case. I wish I knew why they were watching this house in particular. Let me know your theories in the comments below. In our 6th spot, we have the sleeping sickness. So from 1917 to 1928, 500,000 people suffered from a sickness called the sleeping sickness. This caused their bodies to be in a frozen type state while their mind was still active. About a third ended up dying and the survivors were left with limited speech and body movements. Now, what causes this is unknown, although people have theorized that it might have something to do with brain inflammation. But what's the weirdest thing about that is that it disappeared randomly and everyone was fine for years and then it just reappeared suddenly again. So what is truly causing this? Does a higher power have control of our bodies? Or is it an illness created by the government? Someone make a movie with these theories, please. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Girl Scout trip. So this one is a truly devastating and heartbreaking story. In 1977 in Oklahoma, 3 girls disappeared from their tent during a Girl Scout trip. These girls were Lori Farmer, age 8, Michelle Guzzi, age 9, and Denise Milner, age 10. In the morning, the counselor found the bodies of these 3 girls laying by a tree. 2 months prior, the counselor actually received a warning that this might happen. She was doing a training session when she found her cabin was broken into and someone ate a box of donuts and left some very disturbing notes. The first note had "kill" written repeatedly on it. The second said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls." The counselor just thought it was just a prank until it actually happened. After police investigation, they did arrest an escaped convict, but he was later found not guilty. After continuous investigations, police think that a woman could have been involved in the killing. Other evidence makes people think that 4 men were involved. But to this day, it still goes unsolved. In fact, the camp to this day still remains shut down. But for the movie, I'm thinking maybe a group of teens go to the camp to seek a paranormal thrill and then they end up being the next victims. Yes, it kind of sounds like Friday the 13th and Camp Crystal Lake, but this time it's grounded in truth. In 4th place, we have the phone stalker. In 2007 in Washington, numerous families reported receiving death threats over the phone. Apparently, the individual on the other end of the line knew way too much about these families and used it to their advantage. Now, some of these threats included the mystery phone person saying that they would kill their children, pets, or other family members. Every time they received a call, it would appear on their phone as restricted. Some families even received recordings of their own private conversations, even one that they had between a police detective. Apparently, the caller knows everything about these families, from what they're wearing, to the conversations that they've had, to where they are. They believe that this caller was using their own cell phones to spy on them, and they managed to do so even when the phone was off. One family by the name of the Q Kendall family even changed all their phones and numbers, and the caller was still able to contact them. This person tormented the family for months. When they got a new security system installed in their house, this caller called them and commented on how they knew their passcode and could enter their house. This continued until one day the torment just stopped. But the caller was never caught. That would definitely make a good stalker movie. This person has some Joe from the Netflix show You vibes, that's for sure. Up next at number 3, we have the case of the men in the lead masks. This next case is so fascinating and mysterious, I actually love it. So in 1966 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 2 electronics repairmen were found dead. What was strange about this is that they were both found wearing business suits, waterproof coats, and lead eye masks. You know, what people wear when they are going to be exposed to radiation. But then why did they only have the eyepieces and not the full mask? I guess that's part of the mystery. Anyways, with them there was a notebook that read 4:30 p.m. be at determined place. 6:30 p.m. swallow capsules. Wait for mask signal. Now there are a bunch of theories about this case. Some hypothesize that they had a plot with a nuclear reactor or were part of a doomsday cult. But the most common theory was that they were trying to contact UFOs. In fact, the area that they were in had been getting a lot of reports of UFO sightings. Now what frustrates me about this case is that there were no toxicology reports done. So we don't even know what capsules they took or if they died from that or something else. Either way, there needs to be a movie done on this. Maybe they were successful and ended up contacting aliens, and they were the ones who killed them after they saw too much. Who knows? In our second spot we have the SODDER children. I wish that someone would get on solving these cases because I need answers, especially for this next one. So in West Virginia on Christmas Eve, George and Jenny SODDER's home was burned down. Now they had all 10 of their children in the home at the time of the fire. However, only 5 made it out. The other 5 seem to have disappeared without a trace. They don't believe that they perished in the fire because no evidence to this was found. Now, here's where it gets more strange. Apparently, a woman claimed to have seen the 5 children watching their house burn from a passing car. Then another woman claims she saw the children at a hotel a week after the fire accompanied by 4 strangers. So were the 5 kids kidnapped? Who knows, but I need a movie made. And in our number 1 spot we have the disappearance of KRIS and LIZANNE. This case is extremely sad, and although there are numerous theories out there, it still remains a huge mystery. On April 1st, 2014, 2 young girls named KRIS Kremers and LIZANNE Froon went on a hike in the Panamanian jungle. But sadly, they never made it back home. They spent 6 months planning their trip to Panama. They had planned to hike, volunteer, and teach arts and crafts to the local children. On April 1st, their dog returned to their host family's home without the girls. On April 2nd, they both missed their private walking tour. The host family alerted the authorities and an aerial search of the forest was done. Searches were conducted for weeks, but the girls were nowhere to be found. That's when their blue backpack was found along the banks of a river. In the backpack contained LIZANNE's passport along with other personal belongings. Most importantly, they found their camera and cell phones. It was revealed that 77 attempts were made to call the police. The photos on the camera revealed heartbreaking evidence. It started off with the girls taking normal photos showing how excited they were on their trip. The next set of photos were taken in the dead of night on April 8th. Some were just random photos showing their surroundings. Another photo was of the back of KRIS's head showing blood dripping from her temple. Other photos were just completely black, so it's theorized that they used their camera flash as a source of light. Others theorize that LIZANNE was taking photos to document KRIS's injuries and their location. 2 months later, a pelvic bone and a foot still inside a boot were found. Then the bones of both the women were discovered. Some say they died after getting lost in the jungle. Others theorize that they were murdered and the killer deliberately took the photos and made the phone calls to make it seem like they just got lost. Either way, I think this movie should be made from the girls' perspectives as they try and survive for days in the jungle. I could see it kind of being shot like a Blair Witch style film. And of course you can add in the element of there being a potential murderer. So that could just make it that much more terrifying. Starting off at number 10, we have The Exorcism. Now, I know that there are tons of exorcism movies out there, but this next one, it needs to be made into a movie for sure. Let me explain. So a family in North London claimed that their 26-year-old son was a victim of possession. In August of 2016, they claimed that their son Kennedy Ife started to act more violent. He would say that a snake was living inside of him. He bit his father and he threatened to harm himself. This is when they restrained him to his bed. They then proceeded to conduct an exorcism on Kennedy. The family was very convinced that a demon was inside of Kennedy, and that's what Kennedy referred to as the snake in his body. They left Kennedy strapped to the bed for 3 days without any medical attention. For those 3 days, they would just pray continuously. However, this sadly didn't work. He ended up developing breathing issues and passed away. When police arrived, they found that the family had tried to resurrect Kennedy from the dead. All 7 members of the Ives family were convicted of manslaughter and false imprisonment. However, they were all cleared of charges in March of 2019. So was Kennedy really possessed, or did the family just make that up? Because then they also tried to resurrect him, which I mean, it's not typically a normal thing to do. But imagine that as a movie. I'd watch it. It's a pretty interesting story for me. Also, if he was possessed, where did the demon go? Like, who's its new host? Because if a host dies, it doesn't necessarily mean that the demon will too. Maybe that could be explored in the movie adaptation. Moving on to number 9, we have the shoe in the riverbed. Now, this story surrounds two friends out on a road trip. They were headed to New Mexico when they decided to pull over near a river dam. Upon exploring the river, one of the friends recalls feeling as if they were being watched. That was when they came across a bone on the ground. It resembled a spinal cord, but they believed that it just belonged to an animal. As they continued on, they saw a weird rust-colored rock sticking out from the sand. By this rock, there was a half-buried little girl's shoe. The friend went to go kick the shoe into the river, but he heard a little girl's voice say, "No, don't, please." Then the friends found another bone. Eventually, they called the police and found out that the rust-colored rock was actually a part of a pickup truck that was carrying a man, a woman, and their daughter. But what happened? Did the family just crash off the road? Did somebody drive them off the road? This needs to be explored in a movie. Maybe the two friends go on to investigate and solve other mysterious cases while also coming in contact with ghosts. Coming in at number 8, we have the boarding school ghost. In this next story, a man claims that his old boarding school in London was haunted by a young boy. When he was just 8 years old, he left his lunchbox in the lunch hall. As a result, he went back down to the now empty hall to get it, but something strange happened. The wooden door slammed shut behind him and he felt a cool breeze by his side. That's when he saw a shadow of a small boy beside him. All the boy did was point to one of the benches. The man went to the bench and it had the name Charles carved into it. So, who is Charles? In the movie, maybe he was a kid that was picked on and passed away from being hazed. Now he's back trying to get revenge. At number 7, we have the voices. Now, this woman was using a sleep app that basically runs all throughout the night and starts recording when it detects noise. In the morning, she was going through the recording when she could hear a voice talking. In the recording, you can hear a bunch of clicks that sound almost like footsteps, and then you can hear the woman say, "What are you doing?" That's in fact her own voice, but she doesn't remember saying that at all. What's even creepier is after that you hear the ghostly voice say, "Nothing." Like, they actually say the word nothing, they don't say nothing. And then you hear what sounds like either, "Oh, be still," or "That's them." Either way, it is terrifying. And throughout the recording, the weird clicking noise is present. Now, she said that she eventually moved from that house and everything was fine. Until her son started talking about seeing a dark figure with no face. Her son also kept asking where Ho was. She thinks that it's a spirit that he was seeing that apparently followed them to their new house. I think this would make a good movie. Just imagine a woman starts using this app to monitor her sleep talking patterns when she discovers she's not the only one in the house. Dun dun dun. Moving on, at number 6 we have the attic. This next story is from the Reddit user Digsdaws. He claims that his 1-bedroom apartment in Melbourne is haunted. It first started when he came home one day and found the wooden plank that was patching a hole in the ceiling on the ground snapped in two. Above the hole led to a small attic space. Now, he claimed that the plank was an inch thick, so it would be hard to break without a decent amount of force applied to it. He thought that maybe someone was in his attic, but that wasn't the case. He called the tenant and she explained that the other 2 renters experienced the same thing. The board was then replaced. A month later, he woke up to a sound of someone being dragged along the floor of the attic. When he went to investigate, he found that the plank was broken in 2 again. He also heard children's voices whispering and heard them say, "It's your turn," over and over again. He was so freaked out that he just went downstairs and he watched some TV. That was until a fuse blew and then his bird started going crazy. He claims that it sounded like his bird was screaming. In the morning, his bird wasn't in his cage. He found him half drowned in the toilet. Thankfully, the bird survived, so don't worry. But when he talked to the landlord about this, she said, "Wow, you heard the whispering too?" Okay. I think landlords need to include that in their listing, like 2-bedroom apartment, nice kitchen, slightly haunted. Like, come on. So, I want to know what happened in that attic space. Clearly something more sinister happened there before he moved in, and I think that's what the movie could focus on. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the doppelganger. Now, it's said that everyone has their own doppelganger, someone who looks eerily just like yourself. But it's said that if you meet your doppelganger, then you will be faced with bad luck. Let me know in the comments below if you have met your doppelganger or who your celebrity twin is. And let me know in the comments what celebrity I look like. I've gotten Caitlin Dever, Alexis Bledel, and even Jessie Barden. Anyways, this one woman claims that she has seen a strange doppelganger version of herself in her own home. So she said that several times in the night she would see herself standing in a mirror. Her husband even said that one night he saw his wife sit up and crawl backward to the end of the bed and stand up by the door. Turns out his wife never moved and was still laying beside him. So who is this version of herself that she is seeing? Is it herself from another universe? Her evil doppelganger? Or a ghost trying to embody her? In our fourth spot, we have the kidnapping. So this next story is my own personal one. It's the time that I almost got kidnapped while on vacation. I swear this is 100% true. So basically when I was around 10 or so, my family went on a trip to Florida to go to Disney World. At around 8 at night, my older brother, who was 16 at the time, took me, my other older brother, who was 14, my older cousin, who was 11, and my younger cousin, who was 8, and we all went outside to the pool for a night swim. Well, while at the pool, me and my cousin made friends with this little girl. She was around the same age as me. Maybe she was like 9 or 8. And we were all having like little fun races and doing like somersaults and handstands in the pool. And then she randomly goes, "I want you to meet my dad." Okay, so I was a very cautious kid and my parents taught me really well about stranger danger. So I was pretty sketched out at that. So I was like, "Why?" She's like, "I want you to meet my dad." I said, "Okay, where is he?" All she did was point. But she pointed to an area that was surrounded by trees and it wasn't even lit up by the pool light. So I was like, "No." But she took my hand and was like, "My dad will love you." And then she just kept pointing where he was, but I couldn't see a man by the pool. So I swam away with my cousin, I told my brother, and we all just went back to the room. But as we were walking away, I saw the girl get out of the pool and start walking towards her dad, and I saw a shadow of a man by the trees in the darkness. So to this day, I'm convinced that this girl was trying to lure me to her dad so that he could kidnap me. Like, why on earth would he be watching his daughter from the trees at a distance and not on the pool deck with all the other parents? So this brings me to my movie idea. A movie about a man who uses his daughter to lure other kids to him. He then kidnaps them and then convinces that he's their real dad. Coming in at number 3, we have the Circleville Writer. In 1976, individuals in Circleville, Ohio started receiving handwritten letters from a mysterious person. Now, similar to the phone stalker case, this anonymous person knew personal details about these individuals. However, there weren't any cell phones that they could use to tap into. Yet they claimed to always be watching these individuals. In one of these letters written to a woman named Mary Gillispie, she was accused of having an affair with the school superintendent. She worked with the school as a school bus driver. Her letter read, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house. I know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it seriously." Then Mary's husband Ron received a letter informing him that he would be in danger if he didn't stop the affair. Mary continued to get more letters. Another one read, "Mary, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out." Shortly after, the letters stopped. Until August 17th in 1997, when Ron received a phone call from this writer. As a result, he got in his car with a gun and headed out. He passed away later that day from crashing into a tree, and his gun had been fired. No one knows why or how this happened. The notes continued to terrorize this family all throughout 1983. Some were even addressed to Mary's daughter. The Circleville Writer went to the extreme when one day Mary was driving the bus down the normal route when she saw signs exposing her had been placed throughout the route. When she went to remove them, she saw that it was rigged with a gun. Therefore, if she would have gotten rid of the sign in a certain way, the gun would have gone off and killed her. Now, this gun was linked to her former brother-in-law, Paul Fresher. Paul claimed he was innocent, but was still sentenced to 7 to 25 years in jail. However, he was not the Circleville letter writer. And in fact, he started to receive notes too while in jail. One letter wrote, "Now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of here? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all?" So he was set up by the Circleville Writer. To this day, no one knows who the writer was. Now, when I was reading about this, I thought it would make a great film about a man who targets people who have sinned and forces them into confessing, or else he kills them. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's already been made, but I mean, it's a pretty solid idea in my opinion. Coming in at number 2, we have my own scary story. Now, I get a lot of comments asking me if I believe in ghosts, and honestly, I don't know what to believe. I've only experienced little tiny things that I end up debunking, partially to make me, be able to sleep at night. Alright, so my story. When I was younger, I was a leader for an arts camp. Now, this camp took place in an old house. It was a historic site and it was used for camps and other activities. But the camp coordinator always said how it was haunted. He claimed that it was once owned by a man. This man ended up faking a robbery in order to get insurance money. He even went as far as to shoot himself in his own leg to make the scene look more realistic. Sadly, he ended up bleeding to death before the cops arrived. Now, people have seen his apparition all throughout the building. There have even been reports of the alarm system being triggered, but when police arrived, no one is there. This has happened several times, and police have even seen this man's face at the window. Now, when I was a leader there, I would deliberately avoid the basement because that was the most haunted space. In the corner where he passed away, it was much warmer than the rest of the basement. Also, the lights down there were motion activated, and there were times when they would just turn on by themselves. I personally would feel super uneasy going down to that basement. In fact, there was one time where a group of us were down there filming a video, and all of a sudden 2 of the staff just felt something at the exact same time and ran upstairs crying. And lastly, this is the freakiest thing of all. In one of the rooms in the basement, the camp coordinator said that the ghost likes to stay in there. It's a room behind a thick, heavy locked door. When he opened it, there was just a single chair in the middle of the room. This is the spot that he likes to sit. You could knock over that chair or move it, and it would just always end up in the same spot. Now, when I saw that chair, I felt like he was sitting right there watching us. Like, it was a really weird feeling. I just knew he was there. So yeah, a haunted camp, a man who accidentally killed himself to try and take his insurance money. All good basis for a movie plot. And in our number 1 spot, we have Friends to the End. So in Arkansas in the 1980s, 2 friends, Don Henry, age 16, and Kevin Ives, age 17, decided to go illegally hunting. Basically, they planned on spotlighting, which is when you shine a light in the animal's eyes, causing them to freeze, and then the other individual shoots them. So they set out on August 22nd in the evening near the train tracks that were behind Henry's home. However, hours later, their bodies were found resting on the train tracks and were run over by a train. Now, their deaths were ultimately thought to be from the train running them over. The coroner originally stated that they were asleep on the tracks after smoking 20 or more marijuana cigarettes. Yeah. Okay, that's hard to believe. But eventually they found out that one of the boys was already dead and the other was unconscious before the train ran them over. However, no one knows who killed these teens or why. All that we're left with is speculation. So one man came forward and said that the teens witnessed a drug drop in the area and were killed as a result. But no one knows if these claims are true. Although we don't fully know what happened that night, I would love a movie from these boys' perspectives. Starting off this countdown, we have the Crescent Hotel. In 1936, Norman G. Baker, a millionaire inventor, turned a hotel into a hospital and posed as a doctor. He claimed that he had a cure for cancer. As a result, he had numerous patients and became super wealthy. He claimed that using aluminum products caused cancer, and that the only way to cure it was through his made-up drug, which was a mixture of alcohol, glycerin, carbolic acid mixed with tea from watermelon seeds, brown corn silk, and clover leaves. As a result, many of the people he treated ended up dying. Now, people don't know what his intentions were. Did he truly believe that he had a cure, or was this all just a ploy to take advantage of vulnerable people? I should also mention that he was obsessed with the color purple. As a result, he would always dress in purple, he drove a purple car, and the hospital walls were painted purple, and he even had a purple chimney. So I'm thinking, a movie about a loony doctor that tricks individuals into thinking that they have some sort of new made-up disease. Meanwhile, in reality, they are actually healthy. Maybe he slowly gives them medication or some sort of drug that's supposed to help them, but it actually makes them feel sick and gives them symptoms of this disease. Then he tricks these individuals into staying at his house, only to find out that he's experimenting on and torturing patients. $1 million idea right there. Wow. Moving on to number 9, we have the Tylenol killer. Tylenol is supposed to help you with pain, not cause you any. Well, in 1982, a number of deaths occurred due to someone lacing the drug with cyanide. Now, this was back in the day when drugs like these didn't come with a proper seal. There would just be a cotton ball shoved inside. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was the first victim and died shortly after taking the pill. After that, 3 members of the Janus family all passed away after taking a Tylenol. More individuals continued to pass on unexplainably until a nurse discovered that it was from the tampered Tylenol. In fact, the pills were so strong that one capsule could have killed thousands. After investigating, they found that multiple Tylenol bottles were contaminated from different stores around Chicago. Now, officers believe that this was the works of Ted Kaczynski. He was a mathematical genius, but gave up that career and started to live a more darker life. He already has been convicted of 3 counts of murder. However, there is still no solid evidence pinning him to being the poisoner. In our 8th spot, we have Stalker Mom. Now, this story is all about a mom named Karen and her stalking store managers. It would make a pretty good comedy movie. This story was posted from the Reddit user LazyDaisy6702. In September of 2018, when this Reddit user was 16 years old, she went to a new high school and didn't have any friends in the area. That's when she was introduced to a woman named Kat. Now, Kat was 27 years old and they still became good and fast friends despite the age difference. They would see each other fairly often and just hang out. Then it got to a point where Kat would want her to stay over 2 or more times a week. She would call her every other day and sometimes even call 13 times a day. Kat also gave her a necklace saying "I love you to the moon and back" and had a heart attached that said daughter. So she would joke saying that she was like her adopted mom. Then it started getting more darker. At one point, this Reddit user and Kat weren't seeing each other that often. As a result, Kat had a breakdown and tried to kill her other friend. Kat then blamed this user for her own actions. Kat was becoming way too obsessed with her. She even went to her boyfriend and said, "You're stealing her away from me." Thankfully, this girl blocked her and they've never had an issue since. Now, this story sounds a lot like the movie The Roommate, but I think that the same director should make a sequel and have it about Kat, and maybe how she likes to befriend younger girls. Maybe she can't have kids of her own, so she likes to play pretend with other girls. Coming in at number 7, we have Kathy Hobbs. Now, there are a lot of people out there that have experienced premonitions. Personally, I've had dreams of stuff happening and then the next day it comes true, but nothing scary. It's just like what my mom's making for dinner or a specific worded text from my friend. Now, this woman named Kathy Hobbs had a premonition, but this time it allowed her to predict her own death. However, she sadly wasn't able to avoid it. So all throughout her life, Kathy would get premonitions of herself dying at age 16. This actually made her develop agoraphobia and she didn't want to leave her house. Shortly after her 16th birthday, she believed that she was no longer in danger. However, on her way back home from buying a book, she was attacked and murdered. That is extremely scary and sad, but I think they could make a movie loosely based off of Kathy's story. Like, maybe it's about a woman that can predict other people's deaths and then tries to save them before she is faced with her inevitable death. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have Room 1046. Another case that I wish I had the answers to. On January 2nd, 1935, a man that went by the name of Roland T. Owen checked into the Present Hotel in Kansas City. He was described as being 20 to 35 in age, nicely dressed with brown hair and a scar on his scalp above his ear. Bellhop noted that he only was traveling with a comb and a toothbrush. Over the course of his stay, strange incidents occurred, such as Owen locking the door from the inside and sitting in the room in complete darkness, or him being visited by a man he called Don. One time, the maid Mary Soptic went to clean his room and Owen was just sitting there in the dark. The phone rang during this time and she heard him say, and I quote, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast." After a moment, he repeated, "No, I am not hungry." Well, people theorize that this was his way of saying, "I can't talk right now, someone's listening." Then one day, the bellhop received a call 3 different times saying that the phone in his room was off the hook for 10 minutes. He went up 3 separate times to get the phone back on the hook. The second time, he actually entered the room where he found him laying naked on the bed. He just assumed that he was drunk, and so he put the phone back on the hook and went back downstairs. Then he received another call saying that the phone was back off the hook. This time when he entered Owen's room, he found him sitting in a puddle of blood with his head in his hands. He suffered from blunt force trauma to his head and had multiple stab wounds. Owen was still conscious when detectives arrived, and when he was asked who was in the room, he said, "No one." He died shortly after arriving to the hospital. Now, this is when it gets even more strange. It is said that Owen was injured well before the bellhop first entered the room. So why didn't Owen tell him that he was hurt? Also, his clothes were missing and some other items in the hotel like the soap and toothpaste. Also, there is no record of a Roland T. Owen, it's just made up. At his funeral, money was sent in a rolled up newspaper, and someone left a bouquet of flowers and a letter that read, "Love forever, Lucille." Now, a woman did come forward claiming that he was her son, Scott Ogletree, but we still have so many unsolved questions. Who murdered him, and why? I mean, a movie could take so many different routes with the story. Maybe he was part of the mob, or maybe the movie could focus on Owen haunting all the guests of the hotel room 1046. At our 5th and halfway mark with the smiley face killer. The smiley face killer got its name from leaving graffiti smiley faces at the scene of every crime. Now, they have made a documentary on it, but I think it would also make a good horror film. The killing started in 1997 and ended in 2008. Now, all of the victims were white, college-aged men. All of these victims were drowned and found with a smiley face graffitied nearby. Some people believe that they were murdered out of jealousy from being good looking or good in school or athletic. Now, some of the murders happened on the same night but in different areas, so detectives even believe that it was done by an organization or group of individuals. The cases also have other weird similarities. In 1997, Patrick McNeil was last seen drinking at a Manhattan bar when found drowned in the New York harbor. In 2016, Matthew Genovese was last seen at a pub drinking and was found drowned as well. Both of these victims were drinking prior to their death and also had no signs of foul play. Detectives believe it was just an accidental drowning and coincidence. But there were 45 deaths, all men around the same age, from death by drowning, with a smiley face left at the scene. That's not a coincidence, it's murder. Moving on to number 4, we have the case of Dorothy Jane Scott. This is a real unsolved case of the missing woman named Dorothy Jane Scott. Now, before Dorothy disappeared, she would receive phone calls from a mysterious caller. The caller would say things like, "When I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you." Other times, the caller would profess his love to her. Now, Dorothy did say that she recognized the man's voice but just couldn't identify who it was. In May of 1980, Dorothy was kidnapped and never seen again. So that night she was at a work meeting. One of her colleagues started to become sick, so she offered to take him to the hospital. When he was released, Dorothy went to her car to bring it to the front of the hospital. The last thing her colleague saw was her car speeding away. They don't know who was driving it. Later, Dorothy's family started to receive phone calls asking if they were related to her, and it would end by saying, "I've got her." They've never found Dorothy or any clues to who this caller may be. Yeah, so they don't know if Dorothy is alive or just being held captive by someone who is obsessed with her. Moving on to number 3, we have the disappearance of Bobby Dunbar. Literally another case that I wish we had answers to. So in 1912, Bobby Dunbar went missing while on a trip to Swayze Lake. He was missing for 8 months until they found Bobby traveling with his kidnapper. Or so they thought it was Bobby. The kidnapper said that the boy's name was Bruce Anderson, but police ignored that and returned this boy to the family. But even the Dunbars didn't recognize their son. They said his eyes were too small, and Bobby didn't even recognize his brothers. But after seeing the boy's birthmarks and scars, they were convinced that it was their missing son. That was until a mother showed up claiming that it was her son Bruce and not Bobby. But the mother wasn't able to identify her son in a lineup, so the boy remained with the Dunbars. Way down the line, when Bobby was grown up, they took DNA tests. Turns out he was actually Bruce Anderson, and that their true son Bobby was still missing. Now, the movie The Changeling is sort of like this, but it covers a completely different real-life case. I think for this movie, they just need to explore this particular case. And at number 2, we have the Beaumont children. First off, I want to shout out WillBake17, who sent me this case on Instagram. Feel free to message me any cases or stories over Instagram. I'll be happy to read them. So, the disappearance of the 3 young Beaumont children remains the longest running missing persons case in Australian history. On January 26, 1966, Jane, age 9, Grant, age 7, and Arna, age 4, boarded a bus and headed to the beach. During that time, Jane was considered old enough to care for her siblings, so they went off by themselves, which they have done many times before. However, that day, they never returned home. Witnesses say that the children did make it to the beach, but that they weren't alone. Apparently, there was a tall, blonde, thin-faced man with them. Others say that it wasn't just a man, but there were actually 2 other individuals with them. Another man and then a woman in a pale blue patterned dress. The last apparent sightings were around 3 p.m. when the postman saw them walking the main road to their home, but apparently they were alone. Over the years, detectives have followed leads trying to find these children. They've done numerous excavations of different properties of suspects and leads. However, none have been successful. So where are these children? Is it possible that they're still alive out there somewhere? Or who is the mastermind behind their potential kidnapping and murder? I think this interesting unsolved case definitely needs its own movie. In our number 1 spot, we have the death of Elisa Lam. Now, this is a truly scary story enough on its own. Elisa Lam was on vacation staying at the CECIL Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. This 21-year-old Canadian was traveling by herself, journaling about her travels along the way. On January 31st, that was the last time she had been seen. Now, the only lead that we have is from the elevator's surveillance footage. This shows her final moments before her disappearance. Now, this footage is quite disturbing. She is seen behaving out of character. She is talking to herself, moving her hands randomly, pressing random elevator buttons, opening and closing the elevator doors, and peering around the elevator corner. A few days later, hotel guests reported the water in their hotel rooms was running black. And they claimed that the tap water was tasting weird. On February 19th, Elisa's body was found rotting and bare in the water tank on the hotel's roof. Her death was labeled as accidental drowning, but everyone believes otherwise. Now, in order for Elisa to have gotten into the water tank, she would have had to gone up to the 15th floor, taken a staircase up to the roof, and turned off the roof alarm. From there, she would have had to climb onto the platform where the hotel's water tanks are, and then up another ladder to get to the tank that she was found in. Now, how did she do this undetected? Especially since the roof has an alarm system and was locked. As a result, people believe that she was possessed or that she was playing the elevator game. The elevator game is said to be the world's most dangerous game. Basically, you have to be in an elevator that has at least 10 floors. When you're in the elevator, you have to press the floor buttons in a specific order. After doing so, you press the 5th floor and a woman will enter the elevator with you. This woman is not alive and it is deadly if you look or talk to her. Then you are supposed to go to the 10th floor, which brings you to another dimension. Sounds like a pretty terrifying horror movie to me. Let me add that this story took place in the Cecil Hotel, which has a grim past already. Richard Ramirez committed 14 murders and lived on the 14th floor in 1985. Jack Unterweger was another killer that stayed in the hotel, and in 1962, a female host guest jumped out of the hotel's window to her death. So yeah, this hotel alone is a good place to base a movie off of. There's just so much in the history. And that's all for today. I definitely would be down to watch some of those if they were made into movies. Who knows? Maybe even I'll turn one of them into a movie one day. Now, as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up, comment down below which one of these stories you would want to see made into a movie, and don't forget to subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos.